Imagine waking up to a world where your internet is just cut. Snipers are reportedly on the rooftops, and your life savings have turned into something the sources are calling ash overnight.
It sounds like fiction, but that is the chilling reality for millions of Iranians right now.
And that's what we're diving into today, the 2025-2026 uprising in Iran. This movement, it seems to be sparked by just sheer economic desperation.
It's a catastrophic collapse of faith in the system. I mean,
Hmm.
our sources are confirming a currency collapsing to 1.42 million real per US dollar.
1.42 million.
Yeah. And on top of that, food inflation hitting a catastrophic 72% year over year.
And the scale of this, I mean, it's what makes this moment so historic. This isn't just some localized unrest.
No, not at all. This is the largest upheaval since the 1979 revolution. We have it confirmed, sweeping across all 31 provinces
All 31.
and exploding in over 500 different locations. The human cost is already, it's devastating. Estimates are suggesting up to 6,000 deaths among protesters.
And in the face of that, the streets are chanting something very, very specific.
They are. This is the final battle. To understand what that phrase really means, to grasp why this isn't just chaos, but a potential revolutionary endpoint, we have to go back. We have to trace the long 70-year cycle of resistance in Iran.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore three critical flashpoints, 1953, 1963, and 1979, to show that what's happening right now isn't an aberration.
It's the latest chapter in a long, long fight for a nation that wants to be both independent of foreign interference and, free from its own internal tyranny.
So we have to start with the moment that Iranian democracy was, for all intents and purposes, stolen.
The 1953 coup, known by its code name, Operation Ajax.
Okay, so let's set the stage. This whole 70-year story starts, as so many of these stories do, with oil.
Exactly. Specifically with the massive British-owned Anglo-Iranian oil company. Today, we know it as BP.
Right.
So in 1951, Iran has a democratically elected leader, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. He has huge popular support, and he decides to do something that many Iranians saw as an act of, well, national dignity.
He nationalized the oil industry.
He seized control from the foreign corporation that had been exploiting Iran's resources for decades. And for the British government, that was completely unforgivable.
I can imagine. So what was the immediate response?
Britain immediately instigated a worldwide oil boycott. The goal was to just crush Iran's economy, to starve Mossadegh's government out of power.
But the U.S. was initially hesitant, weren't they? I remember reading that Truman was against the idea of regime change.
He was. He worried about the precedent it would set for CIA involvement. But then the calculation changed.
When Eisenhower took office.
Exactly. British intelligence, MI6, really went to work persuading the new U.S. administration. They focused heavily on the fear that Mossadegh's government might be vulnerable to a takeover by the Communist Tudeh Party.
Yeah.
By 1953, the U.S. was fully on board.
So let's talk about the operation itself, Operation Ajax. How exactly did the CIA and MI6 pull off this coup in August of '53?
It was a classic hybrid operation. It combined disinformation with street violence. The sources detail how the CIA hired some of Tehran's most feared mobsters to stage these violent pro-Shah riots.
Mobsters? And you mean they literally just paid people to pretend to be a popular uprising?
They literally paid men to bust into the city and take over the streets. These weren't Shah loyalists. They were paid thugs.
So they're manufacturing consent by manufacturing violence.
Precisely. And they also deployed some very sophisticated disinformation. CIA operatives actually posed as members of the Communist Tudeh Party.
No way.
Yes. They went around threatening prominent Muslim leaders, saying things like they'd face savage punishment if they opposed Mossadegh. The whole point was to stir up anti-communist and anti-Mossadegh religious sentiment all at once.
And it worked. The coup succeeded. Mossadegh was overthrown, arrested, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest.
And just like that, absolute power was restored to the young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He then ruled for the next 26 years, completely reliant on U.S. support.
So the crucial takeaway here, the thing that really set the stage for everything that followed.
It's the bitter lesson this taught the Iranian people. It taught them that their democracy, their national sovereignty, could and would be erased by foreign powers the second it threatened Western economic interests.
And that deep-seated mistrust,
Well,
it just festered.
It absolutely did, and it directly fueled the anti-Americanism that exploded in the 1979 revolution. The chaos the CIA created in '53 really did come back to haunt the United States.
Okay, so the Shah knows his power isn't from the people, it's from abroad. Which leads us right to our second flashpoint, a decade later, the 1963 White Revolution. He needed to build some kind of internal power base.
This was his defensive move. He knew he couldn't rule forever just on the back of a foreign-led coup. So he launched the White Revolution, this massive
Yeah.
top-down modernization plan.
A bloodless revolution from the top, he called it.
Right. The idea was to modernize the country so rapidly that a genuine bottom-up revolution couldn't happen. He wanted to dismantle the power of the old landowning aristocracy and, crucially, the clergy.
And on paper, some of the reforms look pretty good. I mean, he gave women the right to vote, he nationalized forests, created literacy and health corps, per capita income just skyrocketed.
It did. There were genuine modernizing efforts, but there was a core fatal contradiction to the whole project.
It was modernization without freedom.
Exactly. While he was building schools, his notorious secret police, Savak, was torturing and silencing anyone who spoke out. And beyond just the repression, his modernization plan managed to alienate the three massive sectors of society that would eventually team up to overthrow him.
Okay, let's break down that coalition. First up, the clergy. Who was the loudest voice opposing these secularizing changes?
That would be Ruhollah Khomeini, who at the time was a relatively obscure Ayatollah in the city of Qom. The clergy felt profoundly threatened.
Why? Because of things like women's suffrage.
That was part of it, but it was also economic. The land redistribution plan directly attacked their power base by targeting the huge tax-exempt land trust, or VAC, that they controlled.
So it was an attack on their wealth and their influence.
Absolutely. And Khomeini was explicit. He framed it as a U.S. plot, calling the Shah a wretched, miserable man and a U.S. puppet who was selling out Iran's Islamic identity.
And what about their traditional allies, the bazaar merchants? They were pushed out too.
So bazaris, this historically powerful class of merchants, they were completely marginalized. The Shah favored huge state-run industries and foreign imports, which just destroyed their traditional businesses.
And that peaked with the anti-profiteering campaign in '75.
A total disaster for them. It led to the closure of something like 40,000 shops and the jailing or exile of thousands of merchants. They saw the Shah as actively trying to destroy their way of life.
And then the third piece of the puzzle, the rural poor. The land reform was supposed to help them.
But it was a catastrophe for the poorest farmers. It really only benefited a small minority of prosperous ones. Millions of small landowners failed, which led to this huge exodus from villages into these sprawling, impoverished urban ghettos.
So you have this huge new urban poor class. They feel abandoned. They're desperate.
And they are highly receptive to the revolutionary religious propaganda coming out of the mosques.
So by 1979, the Shah had, through his own reforms, accidentally created the perfect opposition. He'd alienated the clergy and the merchants, and he'd created a massive, desperate, urban working class ready for a revolution.
Exactly. Which brings us to our third pivotal moment, the explosion in 1979. The pressure cooker finally blew.
Right. And the anti-Shah movement it was this massive coalition. You had students, workers, liberals, nationalists.
And the newly politicized Islamists and bazaris, they all wanted freedom, justice, and to finally throw off that legacy of foreign influence from 1953. The Shah fled. The revolution succeeded.
But the victory was incredibly short-lived.
Ayatollah Khomeini, who had been in exile for years, moved quickly and decisively to seize control. He transformed the country into a theocratic Islamic republic.
Where the supreme leader and the clerics had veto power over everything.
Over every single law. The promise of pluralism just vanished. The liberals and leftists who had been his allies, they were ruthlessly crushed.
And the shift backwards was most immediate and most visible for women.
Women's bodies immediately became the new political battleground. And there's a real tragic irony here.
I mean, the fact that many non-conservative women had actually worn the veil during the protests against the Shah?
Exactly. They wore it as a symbol of opposition to the Shah's forced unveiling policy, the Kashe hijab. It was a symbol of national solidarity against Western influence.
They saw it as a choice, a symbol of resistance, not an obligation.
Precisely. They expected liberty. They did not expect the new regime to turn that choice into a mandatory rule. But on March 7, 1979, Khomeini decreed mandatory veiling for all women in the workplace.
Which triggered immediate protests.
A massive 6-day International Women's Day protest. Non-conservative women flooded the streets. The Islamist forces, who didn't have total control yet, had to make a tactical retreat. They temporarily retracted the decree.
That it was only temporary.
Once they'd purged their liberal and leftist opponents, which they'd done by mid-1981, they brought it back. Mandatory public veiling was enforced.
And then codified into law in 1983.
Right, the Islamic punishment law, which sentenced non-compliant women to up to 74 lashes, enforced by the morality police. The mandatory hijab became a key tool to police political dissent. The revolution had been stolen.
So, if 1979 was a stolen revolution, that brings us right up to the catastrophic conditions of 2025 and 2026. This is where all that history meets this immediate economic devastation.
And this is where the cycle seems to be trying to break itself. This uprising is fueled by pure, unadulterated economic desperation. That crushing currency devaluation we mentioned, 1.42 million real to the dollar, and 72% food inflation.
But what's so fascinating is who sparked this revolt. The sources point to Tehran's Grand Bazaar on December 28, 2025.
This is a monumental rupture. The same Bazari class that helped start the 1979 revolution by breaking with the Shah is now officially breaking with the Islamic Republic. When the traditional economic engine of the nation turns against the government, the regime has lost its foundation.
And the slogans this time around show why protesters are calling this the final battle. This feels different than 2022.
Oh, it's fundamentally different. They are demanding wholesale regime change, not reform. They're chanting death to the dictator, naming Supreme Leader Khamenei directly.
And they're openly waving the banned pre-1979 lion and sun flag.
Right. And chanting, "This is the final battle. Pahlavi will return." It's a complete rejection of the entire clerical system.
There's also this powerful critique of the regime's foreign policy that you can hear in the street chants.
Absolutely. The chant, "Neither Gaza nor Lebanon, my life for Iran," shows this widespread public anger. They see the regime funding foreign proxies like Hezbollah while its own population is starving.
They're demanding Iranian resources be used for Iranians.
And that brings us back to the chilling context we started with. The government's response has been immediate, intense, and focused on total suppression.
The communications blackout.
Starting January 8th, 2026, a total blackout. Sources confirm they're using military-grade jammers to disable private satellite internet, including Starlink, cutting the country off from the world.
And a blackout of that magnitude, as Nobel laureate Shirin Ebadi said, raises the immediate fear that a massacre is being hidden.
The stakes could not be higher. Protesters are being charged as enemies of God, or moharabe.
A crime punishable by death.
A crime universally punishable by death in the Islamic Republic. The regime is trying to use executions as its main tool to instill fear and crush this wave of opposition.
So if we look across these 70 years, what's the through line?
I think you see a continuous unresolved struggle. Iranians have been fighting for two things that are codependent. First, national sovereignty against foreign intervention, that's the lesson from 1953. And second, domestic freedom against tyranny, the unresolved challenge from 1963 and 1979. This uprising is seen by its participants as the final stage, the final battle to achieve both.
And here is the provocative thought for you to carry forward, based on the pattern we just explored. The 1979 revolution only succeeded because the three main pillars of traditional Iranian society, the clergy, the bazaris, and the urban poor, were all united against the Shah. Given that the bazaris and huge parts of the urban poor are now actively against the Islamic Republic, and a good portion of the lower clergy is critical, does this historic alignment suggest the current regime simply lacks the societal support it needs to withstand this final battle? That's the question that will determine Iran's future.